My ruler, once again, I'm just making 2 points. I'm not super worried about making it perfect right now. I'll do that when I come over here and line this up. So I'm going to set up and draw a nice 1-inch gentle line, just a little line there so that I can keep things visible. Now my book, I need to divide up into 4 sections. 4 equal sections, which is not super easy because it's at 7.5. So I'm going to have to do some math here. I'm going to go ahead and hop on and see. So we've got 2, 4. It's almost every 2 inches because it's almost at 8 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. So mine is going to be at 1 inches and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. Yours, whatever the width of your book is, divided up into 4. So mine, because it's almost at 8 inches, I'm going to measure the distance since I'm a 1/2 inch off, and I'm going to divide that distance, that remainder distance at the 8 inches up into 4. That's what I'm going to add to the rest of my book. Just do yours in 4 equal portions. So I'll put a hole here, and now I'm going back over to my light line. So my first hole is going to go here. Slide my ruler over. Here, second hole. Another way to do this is to simply take your jig and fold it in half, and then fold it in half again, and fold it in half again. And then anywhere that you have creases is where you're going to put a dot to punch your pattern. So that's what I'll do here as well, show that step of the process. So you can choose to measure it by hand, or you can just divide it up by folding it. I'm going to put an X right here. That's where 1 dot goes. An X right here. 1 dot goes there. And an X right here. And that's going to be where I punch my holes. The next thing I'm going to do is measure the distance in between. And I'm going to take my ruler and run it from the corner of the book, right here, to my first X. And then whatever the half distance between my first X and this corner is, I'm going to put a dot. So we're going to sew through right there as well. I'm going to do the same thing over here. This X is going to get lined up with this corner. That's where I'll punch a hole. And then at my halfway point between here and here, at 1 inch for my measurements, I'm going to put a spot right there. Now I have my pattern prepared. I'm going to go ahead and punch those holes into my jig. And put a hole here. They need to be ample because we're going to also run this all the way through the book. So I'm going to put the hole in and I'm going to pull the page up around my awl. Punch a hole on that crease where that 1 inch mark was. And then drop another hole right here in the center. Here we go. Moving over one more, punching another hole, bringing that up again, and then I will do my final one right here. Okay, now that I have the holes mapped out, I'm going to get ready to punch those holes onto my book. So once again, I'm going to use binder clips to hold my jig in place. Okay, I'm going to line them up with the edges of my book, and then clip it, and then clip it again. This will hold nice and steady while I do my pattern for my binding. So I'm going to take my awl and I'm going to punch these holes into the book. I want to get all the way through the book, so you do have to use a little bit of muscle. And once you feel it getting through the book, and you can feel that point of the awl on the other side, and you really want to push it all the way through. You want to make those holes nice and big. Doing it again on this side, punching the hole all the way through. Finding that X in the middle right there, once again, where we punched our hole in the jig. Getting it all the way through the book, and then I'm going to make it a nice big ample sized hole. And then the same thing right here in my final corner. Punching the last hole at the top left. Okay, now that the holes are punched, I can take the jig off of the front. Remove that pattern. I won't need that anymore. You can see the holes are in the book. And now we're going to begin sewing. You need to pause and rewind. No problem there. Sewing does take time. You want to come up with some thread and you want to make it 4 times the width of your book. 1, now 2. Here's my 3rd and measuring the 4th. At that point I can snip it. And I'm going to grab my needle for sewing. And unlike sewing clothing, you will not actually tie a knot on your thread at all. We're just going to pull it through and create a tail. And so you'll leave a little tail right there. And you're not going to tie it off. We're not going to pull the thread all the way through. What we're going to do is we're going to come to the center of the book and pick one of the holes in the middle. And we're going to put our hands in the middle of our book like this. We're going to pull it open. And we're going to run our first stitch through one of those middle holes. It can be hole 2, 3, or 4. Now that I have pulled my thread through, I'm going to leave about 2 inches left over. And I'm going to tuck that into the inside of the book. We're going to come back to that at the very end. And we'll tie off our book right there. Now, this pattern is fairly simple. Every stitch alternates between wrapping around the spine and coming through the same hole, and then we'll jump up and go along the spine and go through the other hole. So first things first, I'm going to wrap around the spine of the same hole that I just brought my first stitch through. There we go. I'm going to pull it nice and taut, and I'm going to try to keep it taut the whole time. Now I'm going to go up the book and make a stitch. Okay, now that's jumped up, and wrap it around, come through again. There we go. Now that I went around the spine, I have to jump up again, so I'm going to wrap around the edge of the book, around the foredge, and I'm going to go through the same hole. Now I'm going to come through my secondary hole, jumping up, and now I'm going to wrap around. Pull that nice and taut, and now I'm going to jump up and wrap around. Pull that nice and taut, and now I'm going to jump up the book again, go through that same hole, and I'm going to do a double jump up here. I'm going to go into this hole that I started from the first side of the book. Now we're going to work on completing that pattern. You're going to jump up the book, wrap around the spine, jump up the book, wrap around the spine, and I ran out of thread. So what I'm going to do, a special kind of knot for book binding. You can use this if you run out of thread as well, or you can pull your stitches out and start again. I'm just going to pull out another length of thread. And as close to this hole as possible so that I can tuck it in, I'm going to make a loop with my thread and hold it where you can see it. There we go. Okay, so you got a loop with the thread, and then I'm going to come and take the tail of this, and I'm gonna go over and under, and it's just like making a square knot. So now I have this little over under pretzel. I'll put an instruction on this on the web page too. And then I'm gonna come down and around and make a second loop. It's kind of like a slip knot. Okay, I have this little lasso here now, right around my square knot, and it's gonna grab my old thread. I'm going to put my old thread through that top loop, and then I'm going to pull the extra tail, being careful not to pull the other threads. I'm going to grab that, let it go. When you get it right, you're going to hear a little pop, pop. Good. That should work in extending my thread, and it won't pull through, and I can slide that knot down into that hole, so that you don't see it. Now I can trim those off. I'm going to tuck that little knot in there so it's invisible on the sewing side. Here we go. And I'm going to continue sewing the pattern of my book. Threading my needle again. And now that I went around that edge, I need to jump up and over on this side into the decorative hole. I'm going to pull that through. Now I'm going to wrap around the spine again. Come through that hole one more time. There we go. Wrap around the foredge. Back in this hole. And now I'm about to complete my pattern. Going into the last stitch on this side, down and around, and then turning it over, and I'm going to go in my final hole, but remember I have to tie my book off, so I can take my book binding clips off now, my binder clips. Okay, so we need to get back to the tail that we left inside of our book to finish off our sewing. Mine is right here. Go ahead and open your book up and find that tail that you left behind. You're going to leave your book open, and you're going to come in that last hole with your needle. Put this up a little bit. You're going to go in this last hole, and you're going to come in at an angle, as you can see, so that you can push your needle through into the interior of your book, into where that tail is. Pull that all the way through. Oh, nice and taut. Pulling that through. And now you're going to tie a regular square knot. Over, under, and over, under again. So over, under. Yep. And then over, under again. Now you have a completed book. You're going to trim your tail. You've got this. It's got no visible knots on the outside. It is seamless. And you have completed the pattern. The final step is to score your pages with your bone folder. So we're going to come back down here again. We're going to hold our ruler along the edge of our front cover. And we're going to take our bone folder and we're going to run it along the top edge and score it. Let's flip our book over onto the other side and do the same thing. Scored that twice. Now I can open my book up and see how it's got a nice crease right there. Now my book is going to open and close easily. And I'm going to go ahead, and you can decide, now if your book isn't that thick, you don't need to do this step. I'm going to score all my pages just so my book lies flat and opens and closes easily. And I put about 15 pages in my interior. I might do every other one because that score mark really does go through. Once you score, give a nice crease. Come through and score again. Do a nice fold. scoring again and folding. You go through the whole book. Now I'm going to flip over to the other side, and I'm going to gently do the same thing. Okay, now that that's all scored and ready to go, for any of you who did photography, this is a great place to put your pictures. What I would recommend is opening the book up. Move this down a little bit. And take one of your photographs. You're going to set it on the inside. And with the pencil, you're going to lightly mark where your corners are, all 4 of them. You can erase those when you're done. And then I'm going to put a protective layer between the page that I'm about to cut and where I actually have my artwork. So I'm just going to put something down to protect so I don't cut through all the pages. And I'm just going to cut a little diagonal line from the dots of the corners to the other dots. Okay, we made this about 1/4 of an inch in, and now I can slide my photo into my book. And remember, you can erase those dots. I highly recommend keeping the book looking nice and clean by erasing all of the marks that you made. Okay, my last corner, I'm being really gentle here because I did put some nice Japanese paper in there, but now I have a book that can hold all of my photography, and I can write my Voice Our Stories into your Rosa questions and answers in here. And I have a fully handmade book. It's a really nice size. It's pretty big. I can do quite a bit with this. You guys should be really proud of yourselves. Also, don't forget to make a mock-up. Make a test book first before you move to your final good paper. This should be a really fun project. Don't forget to email if you have any questions, and I'll put resources and links on the website. Can't wait to see what everybody makes. Thank you.